Me and my mates next year are all doing photography as a subject, and the problem with that is, not to blow smoke up my ass, but I'm a lot better at photography than them. So I'm making this video to teach them a little bit about my knowledge on photography, and if you're not one of my mates, then this is just a video on the basics of photography, specifically digital photography, because I don't know a fucking thing about film photography. Now this is a camera, duh, but the camera is made of two things. The lens, which is this fucking sticky yatty bit, and then the actual camera body. The camera captures what you see, and the lens makes it so the camera can actually see what it sees. How the camera actually takes a photo is that there is a sensor inside this. Essentially, you gotta think as everything you see as light. Like all color is light. That is essentially what it is, because like technically color isn't real, and it's just how our eyes interpret what we see. And the sensor inside this camera converts light into ones and zeros essentially, and then that is pixels, what an image is made out of. Now I'm gonna start with the basic shit first. That was really basic. That's like if you've been locked in like a basement your whole life and have never seen the world, that's how I am interpreting like my friends, their knowledge on this, because they don't know their fucking ass from their elbow, most of them. Okay, there are essentially two different types of photo cameras. There is DSLR and mirrorless. DSLR stands for Digital Single Lens Reflex. It uses a mirror and an optical viewfinder, and light bounces off the mirror into your eye. This bit here is the viewfinder, by the way. Light enters the lens into the mirror, and then it bounces what the lens sees into the viewfinder. And it also bounces it into the sensor. So essentially it means you're seeing whatever the sensor is seeing. The good thing about DSLRs is they are cheaper, great battery life, huge lens selection, and they're durable and reliable pretty much. I've dropped this thing so many times, has not broken. DSLRs are getting phased out and they're often more bulkier, heavier, and the mirror adds a mechanical noise. It's gonna take a photo. It makes that noise. And mirrorless cameras do not make that noise. DSLRs are best for like traditional photographers, and they're also great in shit like stills, sports, and wildlife. If you're not too up close to the animal, because then the mechanical noise will scare it. Mirrorless cameras, which is what I'm shooting on for this video. Mirrorless cameras do not have a mirror like the DSLRs do. Light goes straight into the sensor. So light goes through the sensor, and on the camera, it displays a live digital preview on the screen or electronic viewfinder. Mirrorless cameras are smaller and lighter than DSLRs, and they have faster shooting, better autofocus. And also, a lot of people prefer mirrorless cameras because what you see on the screen when you're taking the photo is what you get, instead of DSLRs where it's like you got to guess how the image is going to look because you're just seeing a mirror. And mirrorless cameras can be more expensive, especially full frame models, which is this one. And they also have less battery life. I'm seeing on my screen that the battery life has already gone down. Been filming for 10 minutes. Should not do this. Mirrorless cameras are best for hybrid shooters, so if you're shooting video and photos. They're good for creators and like travel photographers. So that was about essentially the different types of cameras you can get for photos, but lenses is a whole other world. There are so many options, but like the main options you can get are prime lenses, wide angle lenses or fisheye lenses, telephoto lenses, macro lenses, and standard lenses. Going back to this camera I'm filming with, it has a standard lens in it. So what that means is the f-stop or the aperture, which I'll get to in a minute, is pretty basic. It's f2.4 to f11, I think, or not f11, like f20. I don't fucking know. And it means the focal length, which is in millimeters. Oh fuck, when I was writing the script, I was like, okay, I gotta put down what millimeters mean, like 200 mil, what the fuck does that mean? I don't know what it means, but the bigger the number is, the more it zooms in. So I think I'm shooting on, doesn't say on the screen, I think I'm shooting on like 35 mil right now, which is like pretty normal. This is like what our eyes see pretty much. 50 mil is more of like a zoom, like the FOV, your field of view is a lot smaller, but it looks more cinematic. Let me just show you what that looks like. This is 50 mil. Isn't it so like cinematic like this? That's better. You could see literally all of my pimples. So let's talk about what the lenses actually do. So what prime lenses do is they have a very small aperture, which I'll get to what that word means in a minute. Hold your fucking horses. Wide angle lenses or fisheye lenses have a very small mil, like a 12 millimeter. And that would make it like on our phones. This camera is an ultra wide camera, or like fisheye camera. It's not really fisheye, but it's almost. Telephoto lenses they have a very big millimeter, so they can zoom in really far. This lens is a telephoto lens. It has an 800 mil, yes, 800 mil on it, and it zooms in really, really far. But the problem with this is it's fixed at 800 mil, so you can't do any less or any more than that, which is tricky. I've taken photos with this sometimes and it's tricky, but all the other 800 mil lenses are like $10,000 fucking dollars, and I'm not doing that. Macro lenses are essentially like a not telescope, what are they fucking called? You know, in labs when you zoom in really far on something, like zoom in really good, that is essentially a macro lens, but for normal everyday cameras. So these are good for like taking pictures of ants or some shit. Before I tell you about aperture, what that word means, hold your horses, I gotta get through how you actually, you know, get photos off of your camera. Like, how does the camera store it? SD cards. So it's not like phones, our phones, they just store it onto the phone. There's like a terabyte in this, not fucking terabyte, what the fuck. But it stores it on the phone. On the camera, it doesn't have its own storage. You need an SD card. And the formats that the camera can store it in is JPEG or RAW. JPEG is it's kind of like outdated JPEG. Like PNGs have more quality than JPEGs, but JPEGs are what most cameras still use as their like default format. And RAW is a higher quality format that's directly from the camera. It doesn't color grade it, doesn't use Canon's like color grading, just straight from the sensor pretty much. Here are some other terms it would be useful to know before you learn about aperture and shutter speed and all that fucking shit. Aspect ratio is essentially how the image, like the container the image is in. For a long time, we used to use a 4:3 aspect ratio in everything, in video and shit. It's like a slightly rectangle square, but nowadays most videos are in 16:9. So if I took a landscape photo like this, it would be in 16:9. If I took it like this, it would be in 9:16. Resolution, I feel like this is an obvious one, but I gotta go over it. It is how many pixels are in your image. The higher the resolution, the more high quality the picture is. And often resolution is labeled as megapixels in a lot of cameras. So essentially a megapixel is 1 million pixels. So if you look at HD videos for example, even though like I want to keep this photography based, not videography, but HD videos are 1080p. You know, when you go on YouTube and you change the quality of the video, it's like 1080p, 720, 480. 1080p is HD, but it doesn't actually mean there's 1080 pixels. It's just a number of vertical pixels. And the amount of horizontal pictures in a 1080 video is 1920. So it would be 1920 times 1080, which is about 2 million megapixels if you calculate it. This camera I'm shooting on is 24 megapixels, so that means it captures 6,000 by 4,000 pixels if you're shooting photos. Alrighty, aperture. The aperture essentially controls how much light is getting through to the sensor via the lens. So the aperture you change via the lens. There's like a little mechanism and it can shrink the hole or open it. So shrink it, open it. So the lower the aperture number, so the bigger the hole is. This is a high aperture number, lower aperture number. So for example, f2.8. The more light gets through to the sensor because it's a bigger hole, so it's allowing more light, but also the more blurred the background is. So if I stand here, for example, the more blurred the background becomes. If I stand here, the more in focus it is slightly. If I had a larger aperture on this, I'm doing f4.5 right now, the more the background would be in focus too. So the higher the aperture number, so like f.18 for example, a lot less light is coming through to the sensor, but the background is a lot less blurred. Unlike aperture, shutter speed is changed via the camera, and the shutter speed is how fast the camera actually takes a photo. So the faster the shutter speed, the higher the shutter speed number will be, or I actually guess it's a smaller number because how shutter speed works. It also works for video, which I won't explain, but the shutter speed on this right now is 1/125. So that means it's taking like, I don't know how video works, I'll just explain it for photo. But essentially, if I use a 1/125 shutter speed, it means it's taking a photo in 125th of a second. That is how fast it's taking the photo if I use a shutter speed like this. So the lower the shutter speed, I'll just say that. Lower means bigger number, okay? That's all you need to know. The lower the shutter speed, the less the subject is blurred. So like if I was taking a photo of like a dog and they were like panting and moving up and down a lot, and I had a high shutter speed, like 1/2 of a second shutter speed, then it would be blurred because 1/2 a second is like, it's like that. And if the dog's moving in between that, they're going to be blurred. The higher your shutter speed, the less light will come into your image because it only like sees all the light for 125th of a second. That's not a lot of light to take in. But if your shutter speed was a lot longer, it would bring in more light. So essentially, the longer your shutter speed, more light, but more blurry. The higher your shutter speed, the less blurry, but less light. Now, last thing pretty much, I'm probably going to forget something so important in this video, I just know, and I'll be like, fuck! Now, ISO, I forgot what it stands for, but essentially it is the sensor's sensitivity to light. That is hard, say that 10 times. And now with those three, aperture, shutter speed, and ISO, those are like what I like to call the three musketeers of light. You gotta like balance these things perfectly. So you want the shutter speed right, so your subject isn't blurry, but you want it to bring as much light in, and you want your aperture to like be like open enough, but not too open depending on what you're filming. I mean, taking a photo. Fuck! And then your ISO, you don't want it too high, because the higher your ISO, the more grainy your video is going to look, especially in darker areas. Like, I'm going to assume when I edit this in post-production, I'm going to see a lot of grain there. And that is because my ISO is at 12,800, which is a pretty high ISO. Now, if you want to get familiar with cameras, you got to know all the top brands. I'll just go through these really fast. Canon, Nikon, Sony, Fujifilm, and Panasonic, or Lumix. That's what they call their cameras. Canon is like pretty much like the Apple of cameras. Like good ecosystem, good lenses, cameras are beginner to pro, like reliable performance, the interface is pretty easy to use if you're a beginner, and excellent color grading off the bat, so you don't need to do that much editing in post. But the only con about Canon is that they're not very innovative compared to brands like Sony, which I'll get to, who are very innovative in like the autofocus department and other shit. Nikon has a strong value for money, strong build quality, and good for shooters prioritizing like landscape or wildlife. The only cons with Nikon are like not a lot of lens options for like their new mirrorless cameras, but that's like pretty much it. Sony is very strong in the mirrorless cameras department and like constantly pushing innovation and sensor technology. They're very good for low light, some of their high-end cameras. You got cutting edge features, and the cons is that the interface is like hard to use for beginners, and the ecosystem evolves very fast. So if you're like a proper photographer and want the best of the best for your clients and shit, then you're gonna have to spend a lot of money to keep up if you're with Sony. Fujifilm, I've never shot on a Fuji camera, but they have excellent color science, good for street photography, and they focus on style pretty much Fuji. So if you're going Fuji, like you're doing like aesthetic photos and shit, you're not really doing wildlife or landscape. This is like a street photography camera. This is like, if you own a Fujifilm, you are a hipster, like sorry. And the only problem with Fujifilm is that they don't really have a lot of lens options as well. Now, Lumix or Panasonic, if you're only doing photography, this is not really the camera you want. They definitely cater towards videos and like have way fewer lens options for stills. let's go into the creative stuff, and starting off the bat, composition. Let me take a drink for this one. Now, composition, if you know what that word means, it means like how things are laid out pretty much, and it's the same for taking photos. There's different types of compositions, and pretty much the main one is the rule of thirds. If you've ever taken a photo and there's those like gridded lines in like thirds, that is the rule of thirds, and it pretty much means like the science behind it is like our eyes gravitate towards like where the lines are first. When we first look at an image, we're looking at those lines first. So you want to put your subject in one of those lines, but you can also put them in the center as well. It doesn't really fucking matter that much. It's just like if you want to have it really technical and like artsy, put it in the thirds, your subject. And also in composition, there's leading lines. If you've watched a lot of Stanley Kubrick films and are a fucking nerd like that, you know he likes to do those shots where there's like a subject in the middle and then the foreground, the foreground, it's like a hallway or some shit, like in 2001 Space Odyssey, his famous shot from that where the astronaut guy is walking down and he's in the middle of the frame and there's a hallway, there's leading lines going towards the subject and makes your eyes gravitate towards the subject. It essentially encourages you to look at the subject. There's pretty much two different types of compositions as well. There's symmetry and asymmetry. I'm sure you know what those words mean, please. So if you want a more balanced or formal look, you're going to do asymmetrical composition. If you want it to feel more dynamic and natural, do a more asymmetrical composition look. And there's also negative space in composition. So like your subject's small and then the background around your subject is just massive. It makes your subject feel isolated if you're going for that look artistically. Here's a good example of a photo I took like 2 years ago. My friend Lily, hope she's watching this, arsehole. Here is like a good negative space composition. You have the subject in the middle and then a lot of negative space, so the subject feels isolated. Here's a photo I took in Melbourne also 2 years ago of the trains, because we like stayed in a hotel right by the major Fleet Street station, I think it's called, probably got that wrong. But essentially the trains are in thirds. So third line down here and third line here. So the trains are in thirds, so it looks nice. This composition is very asymmetrical, but you also still get the third lines. So line down here where this building is, then you get that negative space here, and then you got another third line here with the taller buildings. And something that falls in the line of composition a little is perspective. Perspective is more used in like videography. For example, in horror movies, when you want to make something look really scary, you have the camera pointing downwards and the subject is a lot higher than the camera. That makes it feel as if the subject is mean, powerful, like stronger than you are, the viewer. And if you want your subject to look scared of the monster, you want the camera pointing down, so your subject looks little. Focal point is essentially where the camera's focusing. Like the subject, like that's the focal point of your image. When focusing on a person, you want the focus to be on your eyes, because when we're looking at someone, we're looking at their eyes. So, for example, the focal point of this image is the trains, and for this image, it is my fat cat Oreo. She is the focal point. So, like I said at the start of the video, photography is pretty much lighting. That's how the camera interprets everything it's seeing, and that's how you should interpret your artistic vision as well. So, for example, how I lit this video is soft lighting. I have a softbox pointed to my bedroom wall, and I also have my blinds slightly closed but still letting in natural light to give that soft glow, and it's an overcast day so it's extra soft. And soft lighting creates minimal shadows. So you see the shadow there? It's very minimal, it's not really standing out. But if I had harsh lighting, it would stand out. So hard light does create very contrasty shadows, but if you want that contrasty look, use harsh light. Let me give you an example. Now I have the softbox pointed directly towards me. It's very overblown, but you see the harsh shadow here. That would be very distracting, but if you wanted that contrasty look, go for it. Pre-production. What the fuck does post-production mean? What the fuck does pre-production mean? So pre is before, post is after. That's what the words mean. Post-production is editing the image in photography terms. And you can edit your image on either like your fucking Photos app on your phone, or you can use applications like Lightroom, Adobe Lightroom and shit. And essentially the main things you're going to edit in post-production is the contrast, saturation, and temperature. Haven't really explained contrast that much, but contrast is essentially the light colors from the black colors. And the more contrast you have, the more like intense their changes, but the less contrast you have, the more they intertwine, the more they look the same from your shadows to your, light areas. So for instance, this is dark, other side is pretty light. That is contrast and how it blends in. Saturation is how colorful it is, pretty much how vibrant the colors are. So for example, black and white, there is no saturation at all. There's no color. Temperature is pretty easy one. So when it's like a hotter day, you see it's like warmer. The atmosphere is more warm, but a cooler day, it's like cool. So this image has a warm temperature to it, but a little cool. It's like in between. And this image of the trains has a very cool temperature to it. There's a lot of blues. Just ran into the problem of mirrorless cameras. The battery just died on me, so that's great. Now, interpreting photography and like the actual art form of it, since that's what me and my mates are going to be doing, it's a photography class, so we're going to be artsy and shit, so we need to understand how to interpret an image, which I hope they do, but I'm just going to explain the very basics. So there's so many terms. If you're looking at other art pieces like English work, like literature, and like a painting is pretty much just like fucking photography pretty much. So if you know how to interpret art, you can interpret an image and photograph. Going back to this image of my cat Oreo, there's a lot to interpret from it. So you're going to see the cat first, and then you're going to notice she's on a cat shelf and there's a plant. You can interpret that my cat is domesticated and the plant is a symbol of nature, and she's looking at the plant, so she's looking at nature, but she is domesticated. On the left side of the image, there's a very harsh shadow, which could mean like dark, that domestication is dark and not right. And then on the right side of the image, it's very colourful, meaning nature, so nature is a good thing. That's how you interpret a photograph. And that essentially opens a can of worms for what you can do pretty much. Like, tools are only as useful as the skill the person has, pretty much. That's the quote of the day. And there's so many different types of photography too, like landscape, wildlife, portraits, product photography. Like, there's so many little aspects to all of those fucking parts of photography. Like, product photography, for instance. I got this Red Bull that's been marinating in my room for months. If I just held it like this, that's not very appealing. Like, when do you drink a Red Bull? You drink it ice cold, so you want it to be chilly, so you want to spray some water on it with a spray bottle. You want to put it like in a cooler or an esky or something, and you want the person drinking it to be enjoying it if you want to take a photo of them drinking it. But yeah, that's pretty much it. That is my hopefully short rundown of photography and using a camera. Hopefully this was helpful. If I missed anything really important, tell me, please. Or if you're one of my mates, I will tell you in person when we're in class.